It's so easy to look to the heroes of our faith for inspiration, and we should. But what if some of the most profound lessons actually come from their mistakes? Today, we're going to dig into three biblical figures whose failures can teach us some really invaluable lessons for our own spiritual lives.
But first, just think about this for a second. Have you ever stopped and wondered how a bunch of small, maybe even seemingly insignificant decisions can just stack up over time and end up steering you toward a destination you never ever intended to go to?
And look, our goal here isn't to judge these figures or wag our fingers at them. Not at all. It's to see their humanity. Because by unpacking their flaws and their struggles, we can find some real wisdom, hopefully avoid their pitfalls, and maybe see how God's grace works even through our own weaknesses.
All right, so our first story is about Lot, Abraham's nephew. Now, this was a man who stood at a major crossroads, and the path he ended up choosing reveals the really high cost of what can seem like a totally harmless compromise.
The thing about Lot's journey is that it didn't start with some big, dramatic, evil act. Nope. It started with something I think we can all relate to: discontentment. He just looked at what he had and decided he wanted more. More fertile land for his livestock, more space for his family, more comfort. And this, right here, is a perfect picture of a slippery slope. It all started with that feeling of discontentment. That led to a little compromise. Okay, I'll just live near Sodom, not in it. No big deal. But of course, living near it eventually led to living in it, getting woven into its culture. And the consequence? A choice he made for, a financial upgrade had a devastating spiritual impact on his family for generations to come.
This insight from St. Ambrose, wow, it just gets right to the heart of it, doesn't it? The problem wasn't a lack of land. The real problem was the discord and the restlessness in Lot's own heart. Because when our hearts are restless, no amount of space or money or stuff will ever feel like enough. So the huge takeaway from Lot's story is this: we can chase after perfect external circumstances all we want, but true lasting peace, that's an inside job. It comes from a heart that is grounded in gratitude and contentment with God, right where you are. And this theme of an internal battle, well, it just keeps going with our second figure, King Saul. I mean, on the outside, this guy was exactly what the people wanted in a king. He was tall, he was handsome, he looked the part. But on the inside, he was fighting this deep insecurity that would ultimately lead to his downfall. This warning from the Apostle Paul just perfectly captures the essence of Saul's whole tragedy. The second we think, oh, I've got this, I can handle it on my own, that's the moment we're setting ourselves up for a fall. Saul's story is such a powerful reminder of the danger of overconfidence.
Look, everybody has struggles. We all do. The problem isn't having a weakness, it's leaving that weakness unmanaged. For Saul, his unmanaged pride just festered and it grew into this overwhelming, toxic need to be liked, to hear the applause of the crowd way more than he wanted to hear the command of his God. And when he was confronted about his disobedience, Saul admitted it himself. He said, "I feared the people and I obeyed their voice." Right there, he chose the approval of man over the approval of God, and it revealed a tragically divided heart. St. Basil the Great is basically echoing what Jesus taught us. You just can't serve two masters. Saul tried. He tried to please God and please the people at the same time, but that kind of division is completely unsustainable. Fearing what people think will always pull us away from serving God faithfully.
Okay, so our final example is one of the most beloved saints of all, Peter. But before he became the rock of the church, he was a man who struggled intensely with impulsivity. And that's a challenge that feels so incredibly modern and relatable for us today.
So let me ask you, have you ever experienced this? You feel that buzz in your pocket, you reach for your phone, and there's nothing there. Yeah, that little phenomenon is the perfect modern metaphor for the ancient spiritual impulse to constantly react to every little thing around us.
This twitchiness, this need to fill every single moment of silence, it isn't new. It's a timeless human struggle. Peter couldn't stand silence. Whether it was the transfiguration or a tough teaching from Jesus, his impulse was always to speak up, to do something, instead of just being still and listening.
I love this quote because it totally reframes how we should see silence. We tend to think of it as emptiness, right?
But St. Isaac presents it as something incredibly profound, like a little taste of heaven. Our impulse is to use words, the tools of this world, but the path to deeper spiritual clarity is so often found in just embracing the mystery of silence.
Now, a lot of Peter's impulsivity came from a good place. He loved Jesus, he wanted to protect him. So when Jesus started talking about his coming suffering and death, Peter immediately reacted, "No, this shall not happen to you." But in trying to avoid the cross, he was actually opposing the very will of God, which is what led to Jesus' sharpest rebuke in all of Scripture. "Get behind me, Satan."
And the lesson from Peter here is so powerful for us. Our impulse is to want comfort now, answers now, solutions now. But God often works in the stillness. Real healing and clarity don't come from our frantic activity, but from patiently and silently waiting on Him, even when, and especially when, it feels uncomfortable.
So, what do we take away from these three bad examples? Well, their stories aren't meant to discourage us. They're meant to equip us. They're like big, bright warning signs on our own spiritual journey. From Lot, we learn that those little compromises can seriously erode our spiritual foundation over time. From Saul, we see how pride and the fear of man can literally make us deaf to God's guidance. And from Peter, we're reminded that our own impulsive reactions often disturb the very peace that we're so desperately trying to find. This incredibly practical piece of wisdom from the book of James is a direct antidote to all the flaws we've talked about today. I mean, what if, just this week, we really chose to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry? By learning from these bad examples, we can actually become better examples ourselves, living lives that truly reflect the patient, humble, and faithful righteousness that God desires.